All right, it's Tuesday. Let's open up to page 242 in your math textbook. Remember yesterday I said today we are going to work on just the word problems of dividing decimal by decimal. Now, I will be honest with you. My brain, as you may have noticed, is more of a language arts, reading, writing brain than a math brain. So, math is not my strong suit. And that being said, dividing decimals is very difficult for me. And what's even more difficult for me is figuring out word problems with dividing decimals and which numbers we're dividing by each other, which goes on the outside, which goes on the inside for word problems. That's why I'm breaking this up into 2 days. I would like you to turn to page 242 if you haven't already, and we're going to look at problem number 4 on the guided practice. So I'm going to read this to you, and then I'm going to kind of give you a couple of tips to figure out what needs to be divided by each other. What number goes on the outside, what number goes on the inside. Because if you look at any word problem, you know that there's a lot going on in the problem, and sometimes it gets tricky to figure out what operation you're even doing. And then once you figure out if you're adding, subtracting, multiplying, or dividing in the problem, what number goes where. Okay, so hopefully these tips will help you because they've helped me along the way. So number 4 says Alicia bought 5.75 yards of fleece fabric to make blankets for a charity. She needs 1.85 yards of fabric for each blanket. How many blankets can Alicia make with the fabric she bought? All right, so if you are like me, you're going, which of these two numbers am I dividing by each other? Here's one way you can do it. Now, if it's just the decimals that are confusing you, try changing each one of these decimals to a whole number. Not that you are going to solve them finding the answer with this whole number you're changing it to, but let's just say we had 5 as this whole number, and then 1 is this whole number. Okay, now reread the problem and ignore the decimal numbers that are actually included in there and just use them with your whole number. Okay, Alicia bought 5 yards of fleece fabric to make blankets for charity. She needs 1 yard of fabric for each blanket. How many blankets can Alicia make? Well, now I know that my answer is I bought 5 yards and I only need 1 yard of fabric for each blanket. So that means I can make 5 blankets. Okay? Well, I know my answer now should be around 5. So that being said, you can maybe figure out which one of these two numbers needs to go on the outside or the inside based off of that. If this helps you, great. Go ahead and solve it and set it up. Another way that you can do this is to kind of make a bar diagram or a tape diagram like this. So Alicia bought 5.75 yards of fleece fabric to make blankets. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a big long rectangle here and just say that this is 5.75 yards. Okay, this whole thing here is 5.75 yards. Now she only needs 1.85 yards of fabric for each blanket. So if this whole thing is 5.75, but she only needs probably about this much for each blanket. How many blankets can she make? So we're probably going to divide it up. We want to find how many chunks can this be broken up into. Okay, now because I kind of have this answer in my head, I was able to figure out that I probably will have about 5 pieces, 5 blankets. Okay, but I don't know the exact decimal to the point of how many yards of fabric or how many blankets I can make. Okay, so you can use a tape diagram to show you, and this will actually work for almost every decimal word or divide decimal by decimal word problem you do. Put your biggest number here. Alicia bought 5.7 yards of fleece fabric as a tape diagram, as a big rectangle, and see how many pieces are needing to be broken up into this big tape diagram. And then you can figure out, well, I know that 5.75 yards probably is going to go on the inside. It's right over here, 5.75. And 1.85 is going to go on the outside. Okay, now you notice again, we have a decimal on the outside, decimal on the inside. We need to make this a whole number. 1, 2, 1, 2. I'm going to rewrite it over here. 185 going into 575. Put my decimal. Now I'm ready to solve. Now I know that 185, pretty close to 200. So that means I probably can't quite put 5. If this was closer to 100, I could easily put 5. But let's see what 185 times 4 is. 20. 4 times 8 is 32, plus 2 is 34. 4 times 1 is 4. 7, plus 3 is 7. 740. Does that make sense? Did I do that right? Well, this is almost 200 times 4. My answer should be around 800. So I went a little too far on that one. Let's try 3. 185 times 3. 3 times 5 is 15. 3 times 8 is 24, plus 1 is 25. 3 times 1 is 3, plus 2 is 5. 555. That's underneath it, so let's add that whole number. 3 times 185 is 555, and when I subtract, I get 20. Now I'm going to have to add another 0 to keep solving because I didn't end with the 0 down here, but I ran out of digits up here. So I know 185 can go into 200 once, and I get 15 left over. Okay, now I know that even if I add another 0, I still can't get 185 into 15. So let's do a 0 up on top, and then when I subtract that, I get 0, 1, 5, 0, 0. So now I'm looking at 1500. How many times can 185 go into 1500? Let's try here. 185 times 10, I know is 100 or 1,850. I don't quite need that, so let's do times 8. 8 times 5 is 40. 8 times 8 is 64, plus 4 is 68. 8 times 1 is 8, plus 6 is 14. Okay, and that's 8. 8 times 185 is 1480. When I subtract, I get 20. Now I can bring down another decimal or another 0 here. And I kind of noticed that I already had this number. So that means I'm going to keep repeating. Okay, if I already had 200, tried to go 185 into 200 and got 150, I'm going to keep repeating this same pattern. So I'm going to stop here. Okay, now this could keep going on and on. In fact, it will be 3.108, indefinitely. But I'm going to stop. Now it says, how many blankets can Alicia make with the fabric she bought? Does it make sense to write 3.108 as my answer on the line? To say I can make 3.108 blankets? Now, I don't know about you, but I don't think I would want 0.108 of a blanket. I don't think that would cover me very much, and I don't think that would keep me very warm. About how many blankets can she make? Okay, so this is one of those problems where we have to round down. You can't just, it's kind of like when it involves people. You can't have 0.108 of a person. Same with this. You can't really make 0.108 of a blanket. So we're going to write 3 blankets as our answer. Okay, let's go on to the next page and do problem number 7. So page 243, problem number 7. The average person's stride length, the distance covered by one step. So every time you take a step, a normal step, you're not stretching out to take the biggest step you can with the smallest step you can. It's just your normal step. How much distance is in between your 2 feet when you're taking a step? Is approximately 2.5 feet long. So that's an average. How many steps would the average person take to travel 50 feet? Now let's say this was 2. If we're going to change each of these to a whole number, it's approximately 2 feet long. How many steps would the average person take to travel 50 feet? Well, I know that I have a 50-foot chunk here. Okay, so the person's going to travel 50 feet. And if the person's stride length is only 2.5 feet, how many little chunks am I going to have inside this tape diagram? That's what we're trying to figure out. So now I need to figure out how many times can 2.5 go into 50. Okay, but I have a decimal on the outside, so I need to move my decimal point over once and over one more time here. Even though it didn't really have another digit at the end there, I need to add in that 0. So now my new problem becomes 25, going into 500. Put my decimal point up, and I'm good to go. Now 25 can't go into 5. I'm just going to hold my 0 there. 25 can go into 50 2 times. 2 times 25 is 50. I subtract, I get 0. but I had to bring down that other 0 because I'm not done up here yet. I need to at least go to my decimal point. 25, can't go into 0, 0. 0 times 25 is 0. We subtract, we get 0, and now we're out. So if I were to keep going, my decimal or my answer would be 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0 here. But I don't need to do that. I also don't need this 0 here. So my answer would be 20. How many steps would the average person take to travel 50 feet? My label, how many? I find my question word, and usually it's the word right after that, steps. So 20 steps would be my answer. Okay, now we're going to go on to the back side of this page, so page 244, and do one more practice problem, and then you will be doing your homework after this. A necklace is problem number 10 on page 244. A necklace is being made with beads that are 1.25 centimeters in diameter each. Okay, so think about little beads. Okay, little beads like this, if they're 1.25 centimeters and you're adding them together on a necklace, the necklace is going to be 30 centimeters long. So pretend this is your necklace. 30 centimeters. And you have all the little beads in here that are 1.25 centimeters each. You want to figure out how many beads are needed. How many, here's your question word, beads. Beads is going to be my label. How many beads are needed to make 30 centimeter necklace? So now we're going to do 1.25 divided by 30. Now you'll notice I have to move my decimal point twice here. So that means I have 2 zeros I need to add in. My new problem becomes 125 going into 3,000. Put in my decimal point, I'm ready to divide. Okay, 125 can't go into 3. It also cannot go into 30, but it can go into 300. How many times do you think? 125 plus 125, I know is 250. So that's probably about all I can do. Subtract, and I get 250. I get 50 left over. Then I got to bring down my 0. 125 going into 500. Well, I know that if 2 of them equals 250, I'm going to add another 250 to this because I know 250 plus 250 is 500. So that means I have 4 groups of 125 that equal 500 exactly. I'm out of digits here, and I have a 0 down here. So my answer would be 24. Okay, so 24, and then remember I circled my label in the problem. 24 beads would be needed to make up a 30 centimeter necklace. Okay, you are then going to take your dividing decimals packet, and remember yesterday I said you are going to do the divide decimals by decimals page, only do 1 through 4. Your homework is now going to be problems 5 and 6 down at the bottom. So remember, figure out if you have 2 options. If you want to change each of these numbers here to whole numbers to see if it makes a little bit more sense of what is going into what, please do that. Also, use your tape diagram if you need to do that too, right above the problem or below the problem. Find your question word to figure out your label. Find your question word in the sentence, or sentence is, and then it's usually the next word after your question word. Okay? So remember, each one of these is worth 3 points. 1 for showing your work, 1 for your answer, and 1 for your label. Okay, let me know if you have any questions, and feel free to do some more practice problems in your book if you need more.